Brandon Hurd will be presenting a nutshell talk on acorns, acorn processing, and other niche crop opportunities. Brandon was a seed orchard site manager with the U.S. Forest Service and has worked in permaculture for years. He has done extensive research on value-added processing for native California crops, and today he'll be talking about acorns. And he's been a member of this group since the beginning, so thank you and welcome, Brandon. Go ahead and take over.
Oh, thanks for the praise. All right. Cool. So let's see here. Well, I'm just gonna leave this as is. I have another, so I'm gonna just quickly show you my grad project from Cal Poly. And then I'll switch to another presentation. But my grad project with Cal Poly was studying agroforestry for California climates and restoration. So it just kind of gives you an idea of my lens here. And so a lot of the project was looking at our existing plant communities and microclimates, different groups like the oak savannas, the mixed coniferous forest, mixed evergreen forest, Mediterranean chaparral, and desert scrub. And so looking at those climates, thinking about the dominant tree species and shrub species, and then as well as the community members of those plant communities. So just trying to get an idea of like agroecology in the lens of native restoration. So what plants are useful natively and how we can use other crops around the world that we value in other Mediterranean parts of the world within our agricultural systems. So looking at oak woodlands. So obviously oaks are really important. I'll get more into that later. Valued around the world and by indigenous folks locally. And as a climate analog, there are sweet acorn oaks, so low tannins where you can roast them like chestnuts, really special species with some named cultivars in Spain. And then moving over to the mixed coniferous forests, areas where you would see like Doug fir, black oak, maybe redwoods or white fir. Chestnuts do really well, and hazelnuts and monkey puzzle even. So crops that are not niche in other parts of the world, but tend to be niche locally. And then looking at mixed evergreen forests. So just kind of thinking about kind of getting into the foothills here and in the forest where you might see madrone, tan oak, black oak, a lot of like apple trees and persimmons and stone fruit can basically naturalize and as well the chaparral. So thinking about scrub oak, ceanothus, toyon, fig, mulberry, and carob do really well there. And then going into like desert scrub, another great indigenous food source, honey mesquite, and then other crops like optunia, so prickly pear species, agave. So great indigenous food sources, but also jujubes, date palms in Southern California, and the deserts do really well. And then I also found one with the rare fruit growers called a jelly palm, which is a little bit more versatile than the date palm and grows in more coastal climates. So, and then just to touch up on one niche crop for each of those systems before I jump into more of the acorn focus and whatnot. So here's a Dehesa system. So if you're unfamiliar with Dehesas, they're an oak agricultural system common in Spain and Portugal. I think in Portugal they call them montados. But really it's just a silvopastoral system using Iberian pigs. So they get a little bit more moisture in the summers in the Mediterranean basin. So they can basically graze or forage most of the summer. At the end of the summer, when the acorns drop, they fatten up with the acorns, and the pigs are sold for a valued price. They're really rich and delicious. And I've done a taste test with different levels of acorn amount, and it is significant. So it's kind of interesting to see that and see that in their culture. And then as well, the different types of oaks they use in those ecosystems. They have cork oak, holm oak, and then the sweet acorn oak, the Quercus rotundifolia. And with the cork oak, so they would harvest that for cork. So having different income streams from the pigs, from the cork, and then in some of those areas, it's also common to utilize those acorns for food. There's a company in Portugal called Frio de Mayo. Can't totally remember how to pronounce that, but they're really awesome. And they have a dehesa system. They also make acorn food products like cookies and whatnot. And of course, indigenous people locally have been making it for thousands of years and still process. I'm excited to talk with you, Stephanie, again to reconnect and I'm really excited to hear about the results from the next survey that you're doing. But I'd love to collaborate there. And yeah, and I'm also been learning about European ancestors. So basically, in the northern hemisphere, anywhere there has been oaks, people have been using acorns, and it's interesting to learn about as well. After kind of shucking the idea to the side after colonization and thinking about it as kind of peasant food or just not valued at all. And so, yeah, the biggest consumer of acorns today are folks in Korea. So they make toturimuk, acorn jelly, or acorn noodles. It's served as a savory dish using acorn starch with green onion, soy sauce, whatnot. And then there's another woman who I visited, Marcy Mayer in Greece. So that's her package down there. She makes acorn food on a medium industrial scale. So she processes and shells with a machine, and she's able to, at one point she was selling around the world, and now she just sells in Greece and parts of Europe. But yeah, I just think it's a really big deal. These are our dominant tree species, and I really think it's important to incorporate them once again into our agricultural systems and our restoration systems too. And then my second favorite nut is the chestnut. And so here's, I'm sure we've all heard of the chestnut blight. If not, it's wiped out most of the chestnut trees in the East Coast and the Midwest. And the trees that remained, the government asked to remove them to reduce the spread of the blight. The American Chestnut Foundation is working to slowly taper off, make hybrids with American Chinese chestnuts to eventually create a resistant American chestnut that can be grown like these towering trees once again. But in any case, again, in the mixed coniferous climates around California, they grow really well. So here's me in a chestnut tree in the Santa Cruz Mountains. This chestnut is huge. They're all as big as oaks. It was nestled in a forest of oaks, redwoods, and pine trees. And just really special to see these trees, no irrigation at all, just totally naturalized. And I just envision seeing fields of that rather than, fields of almonds that are sucking up our aquifers and whatnot. And as well as these sweet acorn oaks. And I just see a different version in the future of our agriculture. And then, so for this one, kind of thinking, so this is just the mixed evergreen forest. I guess maybe I should have wrote hollyleaf cherry would be a more common than the choke cherry in California. But in any case, in these habitats, just general fruit trees, stone fruit, apples, palm fruit, persimmons all do really well in this climate. And then Mediterranean chaparral, Mediterranean fruit trees do really well. So carob is a great example. It's a climate appropriate chocolate, nitrogen fixing. It's a nice intercrop for the nitrogen fixing behavior. Chop and drop systems perhaps. And then moving along, desert scrub. So this is the jelly palm tree. So it's a really amazing fruit. I learned about it from the rare fruit growers. Tastes like pineapple, super special. And then here's my little plot at the Cal Poly Experimental Farm. So the top row is the desert scrub. The next row is the Mediterranean chaparral, followed by mixed evergreen, then the mixed coniferous, and then the oak savanna. So using those models and then mimicking it with agricultural species, focusing on agroecology and ecosystem mimicry. Okay, I'm going to switch over here now. Can you see this new slide here? Okay. Um, okay, so that was kind of a lot, but that gives you like a background of these niche crops. I think they're really important. And I guess the big question is how can we embrace those things? And I know in Asia, a lot of these niche crops are not niche, um, and in Europe as well, like with the chestnut and in a lot of cultures, the acorn is not a niche crop either. And again, just to note that there are indigenous folks who've been using this for a long time. I'm in Sonoma County, Pomo, Miwok, Wapo, and Great Rancheria native land. Um, and yeah, so acorn has been important for all those tribes, and it still is. So one of my big goals is to connect ecological farmers and land stewards with resources to grow agroecological crops for our climate. And then I think also it's really important to think about how producers can be supported with the equipment to create value-added products that are high quality to create these changes we need in our agricultural systems. If there's no market, then there's no point in producing these things. But if we can prove that there is a market and that these value-added products can be made, then we can support more agroecological agroforestry efforts. And then additionally, I think it's critical to empower and support indigenous tribes for traditional land management and food processing and giving back to kind of bridge the gaps and decolonialize. Here's just a few niche crops. I at the last year for Christmas, I roasted chestnuts and I brought chestnut cream and made acorn cookies and gathered some jujubes and I sold them at a little Christmas farmers market. It was really fun. But yeah, the chestnut cream is incredible. And so that's from France. And then I found acorns in the mountains and jujubes in Sacramento from just a random fruit tree. These trees are all really happy in those climates, and it was really cool to like showcase that in a fun way. And just thinking about the value-added products. So I know Sonia and Jesse Smith have been working a lot with elderberry, and I think there's a lot of potential there. I'd love to collaborate, and so it's just a great immune support. I could use it a little bit right now. I'm a little bit sick. I don't know if you can tell from my voice, but yeah, an amazing native plant medicine and delicious syrup. Um, And then nut butters are great. Like I just showed the picture of the chestnut cream from France. Some people don't like chestnuts, but I think the chestnut cream is undeniable. It's really delicious. So I think the value added products are kind of what can create that difference from kind of not caring about those crops to caring about them. Um, and then, yeah, so I know that there's also people who are making wine and post fermenting with plum or things like that. In Sonoma County, uh, there's just endless vineyards, and I just can't help but think these people with the financial capacity could really do some great agroforestry. And so I would love to like implement more elderberry. I think it would be really interesting to try wine with elderberry, um, perhaps more plum. In the Luther Burbank Experimental Farm in Sebastopol, he planted a big old chestnut tree or several big chestnut trees, walnuts, all kinds of cool trees. He also planted a tree called Sorbus domestica or the service tree. And this tree is really interesting um, from Eastern Europe, but is really drought tolerant as well. Um, all the trees I just listed, plus this tree, get as big as oaks and tend to do really incredibly once established without any irrigation. So the service tree has these palm fruits similar to a pear, but they're smaller, a little grittier. But they have a natural sulfate agent that can be used for wine processing. And it also has an interesting flavor. Okay, and then so yeah, I'm just talking about the wild flowers. Acorn flour, it's also gluten-free, so that's attractive to a lot of people. And then baked goods, very approachable. I think when I've made acorn cookies, it's kind of inevitable that everyone's gonna love it. It's just butter and sugar, but those kind of things are really like a nice stepping stone. Acorn waffles are, you can taste the acorn flour more, but waffles are always delicious. So just kind of thinking about those things and incorporating them into our diets and into ways that are more approachable, I think is kind of key. Um, Yeah, and then going back to the oak, so the mighty oak, super passionate, and I'm really excited to hear people like Colin coming in. I love working with people like that, and at the farm on the Central Coast, I had lots of volunteer events, and I loved to work with groups of uh, college students and whatnot to teach about this stuff. Um, but so moving on. So yeah, just remembering the acorn. This is a photo from the museum, the Ubaseo Museum in Nevada City from the Nisenan tribe. Just been important for thousands of years, and it's important to maintain respect. Um, Great references like tending the wild and braiding sweetgrass. Just keeping in mind like the foraging rule: never take more than a third of a tree. And there's really important like mentalities you need to have when wild gathering, and making sure it's ethical and well sourced. And so there's a lot of that to take in mind when doing all this at the same time. So, and then my little project for the oak food, I've been making acorn food every year for the last like 5 years. I'm really passionate about it just as a tree crop, as a way to better steward our dominant native tree species. Um, and Yeah, a way to connect people to the land, and then just baking accessible uh, products for people to enjoy and remember those experiences. Um, so here's me with my nut roller. So that there's ways to harvest that are a little bit less backbreaking, and I think it's important to explore those over time. Um, and then, so after collecting the acorns, it's important to like lay them flat to sit in the sun so they don't rot. You want them to dry out so it's easier to shell. And then the shelling and winnowing traditionally with the mortar and pestle. A big rock works great, a hammer. There are shelling machines. Um, oops. And then winnowing to remove the shell. Um, then leaching. So here's me in a workshop here. Um, so acorns are initially inedible. And so it's important to, after you shell it, the acorn meat, you can grind it up, soak it in water, and the tannins from the acorns are removed from water. They're water soluble. So you soak the acorn meat in water, change it once a day, and replace with fresh water. And then after about a week, the acorn is edible. So traditionally, folks would eat it as acorn mush at that point. But if you wanted to preserve it, you could dehydrate it and mill it into a flour. I've done lots of experimenting with different types of oaks, test flavor and whatnot. And yeah, so I think traditionally in the past, black oak and tan oak were considered optimal from local tribes. And I verified that, and it is delicious. I tend to still do a lot of valley oak and as well as black oak, just based on abundance. So it kind of just depends whatever's around you. All acorns can be used this way, as well as tan oak. And yeah, then just baking. So I worked with a really awesome group in SLO called Bread Bike, and they made these pastries for the event. And so usually when you're baking, you want to do like 1/3 acorn flour, 2/3 all purpose, and tends to do really well. How am I doing on time over there?
Good, yeah, we still have over 10 minutes left, so you're doing okay.
Cool. All right, I'll try to wrap it up though. But I just wanted to show you a couple of case studies. So, Marcy Mayer here from Greece. I learned a lot. So I learned a lot from reading books about indigenous processing in the past, as well as Marcy Mayer's book, Eating Acorns. It's really great. Here's her operation. So she's got this shelling machine in the back, and then once the acorns are shelled, there's a little bit of post-processing. She has a solar dehydrator, and it's mostly, yeah, a volunteer force and just a little community run procedure. And I was really inspired to visit her. Second case study, just learning about how they harvest in China was really interesting. So this is a picture from my friend from rural Henan. So a lot of the villagers would just throw acorns into these parking lots and whatnot and just lay them flat. They would dry out there on the spot. They'd sweep them up and then run them through these machines to shell. And it's, yeah, a very different approach. It's kind of interesting to see how that works. But it's a really common food in Korea. So it's yeah, I guess this is brings up a good point to like, it's important to get these niche crops out. And I would love to see the ability to have acorn flour at a farmer's market or even a co-op. But I guess there's also the question of at what point does it become another industrialized thing? And so there's a fine line. And again, keeping that foraging ethical mentality or wild gathered mentality with this reciprocal relationship in mind is really important. And I guess these could all be grown in orchards as well. Sometimes they are, but just kind of thinking about the balance between industrialization versus smaller scale sustainable practices. Yeah, so then moving forward, how can we get these things to the market and what is the right balance and who do we talk to and what kind of relationships do we need to have with the land, with the people, with the product? And yeah, I'd like to talk with you guys and see what you think. But there are machines that we can retrofit to do these things in California. I think agroforestry, I'm really glad that we exist here as a group because I think there's a lot less agroforestry in general that I've been hearing in the Midwest and the East. There's a lot of like chestnut, hazelnut, black walnut, elderberry, honey locust agroforestry in the East. And I'm excited to see what we can do in California. And yeah, I think we can do a lot of those things here, like the elderberry, the chestnut in certain areas, and the oak in most areas of California. And I would love to see how we can do that. And yeah, there's great examples of people doing it around the world and even locally. So just thinking about what's next. So connecting people with the right equipment, connecting with land. I am a human squirrel, so if you have oaks on your property, I would love to come visit. And yeah, I'd also love to like think about using land trusts as a place to maximize our efforts and stack functions where we're utilizing these things while stewarding the land. So stewarding with acorns in mind, indigenous folks would and still do prescribed fire around oaks, and there's many benefits. So removing insects and disease while removing fuel and ladder fuels. So these prescribed fires, there's less acorn weevils. A lot of times it creates more productive trees, yada, yada. Just thinking about stewarding for more than just something to look pretty. Yeah, and then the human connection, just supporting tribes, supporting practitioners, and supporting food producers to create a collaborative agroforestry and wild food market establishment in California. Okay, thanks guys.